Hi, Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming back on the Thrival Nutrition Podcast. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for for letting me be on again and talking about one of my favorite topics.
Yes, it's episode number 5 that we've been on together. And I know what we're talking about today. Everyone has questions on. I get questions so much. I'm sure you do because it's a new, hot thing. But before we get started, introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yep. So my name is Cynthia Thurlow. I am a nurse practitioner. I'm a functional nutritionist, and kind of my mainstay is female hormonal health. So everything related to sex hormones, adrenals, thyroid, digestion is kind of my playground. And everything that I recommend to my clients are things that I've gone through myself. So I always say my own health journey has been like the best preparation for the work that I do with my clients. And so I'm also the creator of a 6-week program called Wholistic Blueprint, which is all done virtually. And I also work one-on-one with my clients as well.
What we're talking about today is intermittent fasting. And I know you probably get so many questions about it, and I know that you do it too. So tell us the basics on what it is, how long do you do it for, and what do you do? What is it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the really cool thing about intermittent fasting, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. And there's differing opinions on how you do it. I mean, for me personally, and what I generally recommend to my clients is that you do a 16-hour fast with an 8-hour feeding window, which means you're really just skipping breakfast. It's not meant to be complicated. It really is very simple when you get down to it. So I will usually break my fast at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's when I'll have my first meal. And then I'll have my last meal at 6 p.m. And it's really that simple. So I don't go to bed feeling overstuffed. I'm not ever uncomfortable. I actually exercise fasted 100%. In fact, we were talking about that before I jumped online. But there are other ways that you can do it. You can do a 24-hour fast. I usually do that once a month. I have some clients that will fast for a couple days episodically. I have some people that intermittent fast just a few days a week. It's really what works best for you and your lifestyle. For me personally, it's easier just to do it consistently than to pick and choose which days I'm going to do it. And there's definitely, I would say the best book I've read about intermittent fasting is by Dr. Fung, F-U-N-G. That's really, it's very accessible information, but it gives a lot of information about the science behind it. That the concept of fasting is not something that's just happened in the last 10 years. I mean, it's been around since biblical times. There are a lot of religions that practice fasting for short periods of time around holidays and holy time periods in their religious rituals. So, to me, it's something that just makes sense to me intrinsically. And, as I was saying to you right before we jumped on, when you think about the fact that you're eating less calories, I mean, that's a lot of the reason why people will lose weight is that they're tapping into their fat stores. The science behind it is such that, you have stored glycogen in the body, which is stored sugar. And when your body needs to pull, when it needs fuel, it will tap into the sugar stores in your skeletal muscle and your liver. Hopefully your triglycerides are within the limits they should be in, because if you have triglycerides floating around, it's generally because there's too much floating sugar. And so it's a really neat way to fuel your body and to do it very efficiently without, you don't have to get any special special tools. You don't have to buy special foods. You can just kind of eat the way you do normally, and you're just closing up your feeding window.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that there was a 16-hour fast in between. Could it be 14 hours or even 12 hours or something like that?
Yes. And so normally when people are trying it, everyone freaks out. They think they're going to starve to death. And really it's more mind over matter than it is that physiologically you can't do it. So yes, when people are starting out, I'll say start off with 13 hours and increase it by an hour every couple of days. What I find is people's sweet spot is usually 14 to 16 hours. 18 hours for me does not work because I will then feel like I'm so hungry by 18 hours that I feel like I need to overeat. What I like though, and a lot of my clients will mention, is they don't feel quite as full. If you've been fasting for 16 hours, by the time you eat that first meal, you eat a reasonable sized portion. You're not, because you've been fasting all that time, you're not feeling stuffed and overly filled. And sometimes they'll go another 4 to 6 hours before they'll have their second meal. And people just appreciate not feeling so full. I think the whole concept, which I believe is antiquated, of 4 to 6 small meals a day, unless there's specific circumstances, it's a way that you're really going to drive blood sugar dysregulation in the body. And our bodies are not designed to graze. The concept of grazing, I think is one I kind of shift people's mindset to thinking that, the way that cavemen ate was that when there was food available and they would eat enough, that sometimes they didn't know when their next meal was. So they weren't, eating a tiny bit of food and then a couple hours later looking for, a protein bar. They were thinking of it as it's a survival. So I need to eat my big meal And then the next time I phone food, I'll eat another big meal. And so that's really what I stress with clients, to have 2 or 3 good sized meals a day and to not be grazing throughout the day, which I know I sometimes get hate mail when I kind of interject those kinds of opinions. But one thing I've learned after, being in healthcare for so many years, that a lot of the nutrition information that the true nutrition dogma that's out there is really antiquated, and it's really not designed to be beneficial for processing carbohydrates effectively. It's very fat phobic and tends to push a lot of, how do I say this? Too many processed grains and too much processed gluten and too much junk that our bodies really don't need and won't use as effectively.
It's really hard to get people out of the whole like 4 to 6 meals a day. Yep. I still get people, and to me that blows my mind, because that's like so outdated. I'm like, you're seriously still following that? But people still like preach that, and it's so annoying, and it drives me a little crazy.
No, it definitely does. It definitely is. And I think, much to your point, I have a good friend she's an IFBB fitness pro. I mean, she's got the most ridiculously beautifully muscular body. And I was working with her earlier this year, and, we had to agree to disagree very respectfully. And I said, obviously I'm not looking to be on I don't want to be on a stage. Like, my introvert self would like scream and run away. But she eats like mini meals throughout the day. And I just said, I think that's great. That works for you. I just know for me, I do well eating. I break my fast at 10. I'll probably eat something small-ish before I take my kids to swimming. And then sadly, I may eat something in the car coming home, because by the time we get home from swimming, it's like 7:00, and it's the flurry of trying to get my kids fed and bathed and get their homework done. But it's all about what works best for you and your family. Really, that's what it comes down to. If you're single, it makes it a whole lot easier. But if you're dealing with kiddos and schedules and all the nonsense.
I tell people too, like, if you find yourself super hungry, like even 2 to 3, even 4 hours after you eat, you probably didn't eat enough in your meal.
Right. More fat.
We should be able to have that nice amount of time in between meals without being so like starving. Like,
yeah. Well, I always say, Reengineer, what did you eat? Did you eat enough fat? And I think we're still in this fat phobic mentality. So I always say, liberalize your fats. Like, I'm sure you have clients like this. I have clients that can eat 1/4 of an avocado because their body just doesn't efficiently break down fats. And then I have other clients who can eat 2 a day. So it's all about, like, maybe you need to increase your portion size of that fat, or maybe you need a handful of nuts. Like, I'm a big fan of having cashews or Marcona almonds in the afternoon with an apple. I mean, that's something, if I feel like I'm fundamentally needing something, I can eat that and I'll do really well with that.
Cool. So what is allowed when you're fasting? Like any certain liquids, things like that?
Water, black coffee, black tea. You don't want to invoke an insulin response. So people ask, what else can I add to my coffee? MCT oil, as you know, is one of those fats that is processed a little differently than coconut oil. So you could do MCT oil. There's always the question, can I do stevia? Can I do sweeteners? No. Anything that's going to evoke an insulin response. So you could do plain bone broth, you could do water, you could do black tea, you could do black coffee, you could add a little bit of MCT oil if you felt like you needed a fat, but I generally think that kind of defeats the purpose. If we're really trying to tap into fat stores, I'm not sure that you necessarily need that, but yeah, just keeping yourself hydrated. And then when you're ready to break it, that's not the time to go chat on a big cheeseburger. Sometimes I'll break a fast with a salad, just something that's a little bit lighter. Today I had chili and sweet potatoes, but just because that's what needed to be eaten. And it was pretty darn good. But at 10:00 in the morning, I was eating like what I would eat for dinner. So it really depends.
Which is normal too. I hate people that are stuck in the breakfast mentality of just, it has to be eggs or it has to be this. I'm like, no, you can totally have salads and chili and whatever else that you want. I mean, there's no special foods for a certain time of day.
Well, and my kids have kind of my kids are very, traditionally, especially my oldest son, traditionally paleo. So he's grain and gluten and tree nut free. So, during the summer, it was a battle over my leftovers. Like the leftovers I would normally eat, like my chili and my sweet potato, my kids were eating it. I was like, you can't eat all my food. So we had to kind of, make multiple pounds of meat so that we could get through the week. My kids don't eat sandwiches. They want leftover meals. So one went with chili this morning. The other one went with like barbecued chicken and cauli rice. And that's just what my kids gravitate towards. And people think it's weird. And I just tell them all the time, it's what my kids, that's how they optimally thrive. And they're both athletes. So I'm like, I'm glad they're doing that. And then they try to sneak in some junk when I'm not looking. I'm like, seriously.
I'm going to say you're weird for eating goldfish.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, what's funny is grandma and grandpa were here for 2 weeks when we were away. And so there's been a lot that I've had to chuck, which included, gosh, someone bought like sourdough pretzels, but they weren't even like the non-junky sourdough pretzels. And so my youngest has been loving it. And this morning he went to school with a huge bag and I looked at him and I said, that's like 3 servings and there's no way you're taking all that to school. So put some back. Because that's not going to happen.
Grandparents,
oh, they're the worst. My mom is the worst. I mean, like our refrigerator, my mom's Italian. My mother thinks we're going to starve. And so she bought, you know how expensive those CHT tortillas are. I think I have like 10 in my freezer. My mom went bananas. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, I buy one at a time because they're so expensive. And I love CHT products, by the way, just love it. And aren't they based in Texas?
Yeah. Austin.
Yes. Love them. Love them. Love them. I'm always singing their praises, but yeah. So she went bananas and overbought stuff. So it's like, she bought that kind of stuff and then she bought crap. And I'm like, she bought like pre-shredded, this is horrible, pre-shredded non-organic cheese that had like potato starch in it and bunch of other garbage. And I'm looking at the ingredients. I'm like, really? I'm like, Mom, you got to look at the ingredient list.
Yes. I'm still teaching my parents. They just don't listen. So.
No, they do what they want. Right.
So I know you tapped into it a little bit. So give us some more benefits of intermittent fasting.
Yeah. So we know better blood sugar control. We know that it should help with mental clarity. It taps into something called autophagy, which is this really cool word. And what it means is that while your body is fasting, it's getting rid of all these diseased and cells that are cellular debris that our bodies don't need. And that's actually thought to be very helpful in, cancer prevention. Autophagy is just one of these really, really cool words. We know that it can be helpful for fat loss. I mean, that's usually singing the praises of things that people like, the buzzwords, fat loss. We know it can help with your overall cholesterol, even triglycerides, because you're tapping into this fasted state. We know that it can be, very beneficial for, overall satiety, because people can start to recognize, am I really hungry, or am I just emotionally feeling like I want to eat something? And I think for a lot of the work that we do with clients, it's really, mindful eating, the concept of, are you really hungry? Because what I've come to find, the more I fast, the longer I fast, I'm able to really clearly differentiate between, am I dehydrated, or am I bored, or am I really hungry? And so helping people really, tap into how those hunger cues feel very different can be hugely beneficial. But those are usually the big ones. You can see improvement in blood sugar levels. You can see improvement in overall lipids. Triglycerides is usually one. Most importantly, insulin levels within the body. And you can do fasting insulins, all very, very helpful. And then, looking at, weight loss as well, weight and fat loss.
Cool. And who shouldn't do intermittent fasting?
It's a good question. Yes. So first and foremost, those with a history of disordered eating. So if you are a prior binge eater, anorexic, bulimic, or have body dysmorphia, I have found that it really fuels those feelings. And so that's probably not, unless it's really under control and you're really in remission, truly in remission. That's the first group of people. Anyone that has blood sugar problems, if you have problems with hypoglycemia, if you are a brittle diabetic, if you've recently been ill, if you're being treated for an acute illness, it's probably not the right thing. But, most commonly what I see is either someone who has a history of disordered eating or disordered relationship with food, because there are a lot of people in the fitness community that really struggle with food issues and weight issues and image issues. And they all go hand in hand. Or the people that have blood sugar problems because they just don't eat enough calories throughout the day. And it's not until we really take a deep dive into what they're doing that it becomes very apparent. I'm like, you can't do fasting until we get your blood sugar stabilized. So those are the people. Beyond that, the real key rule of thumb that I say is to figure out if intermittent fasting works for you is, do you have more energy while you're doing it? Are you mentally clear? If you have more energy and you're clear mentally, then you can do it. If you have no energy and you feel like you're in brain fog, it is not the right technique. And so sometimes people beat themselves up and I'm like, listen, it just isn't a one size fits all phenomenon. Just because it works for your 5 friends and your mom and your sister doesn't mean it'll work for you. it works well for me. And that's why I kind of sing it from the rafters, that I think it can be beneficial for so many people. But if it's not right for you, that's okay. I mean, you still get benefits if you only fast for 12 hours, or if you can really only do well at 13 hours, that's fine too. We also know, based on study data, if you do one 24-hour fast a month, there's still benefits from doing that. There's still benefits if you do it 3 days a week, if you intermittent fast 3 days a week. So it's not so, what I like is it's not so strict, as comparison to so many other things that I see in the nutrition world. I think it can be very adaptable. It can be very fluid. It can be very organic. So finding what works best for you. I tend to be an upholder. If you're familiar with the book, The Four Tendencies, I very much can laser focus, put my blinders on. If it works for me, I can do it. And I feel better doing it. I did it while we were on vacation, when we were away for 2 weeks, and my husband ate breakfast every day. And I just, drank tea and looked around, saw what was going on.
That's awesome. I'm not sure if you mentioned it. You might've missed it. Is the adrenals with stress. So really stressed out people.
Yeah. So I don't recommend it for those that know that they've got some HPA dysregulation. So hypothalamus pituitary dysregulation, aka adrenal fatigue. You have to be very careful because the body perceives it as a stress. If your body's not optimized, if you're not in a position where, and that's why I was talking about if people are sick, if your body's not optimized, it's not always the best technique to use. I know people, it's another one I get those, I don't want to not do that. But it's really about what honoring your body and what your body is ready for, because it is considered to be a stressor. And women that are closer to my age group that, perimenopause and beyond, as I say, it's late. No, I mean, mid to late 30s and beyond, you're there, ladies. I know people don't like to hear that, but, that's when your body is a little less, apt to handle stress. So you have to be a little bit more careful. You need to work with someone that really knows what they're doing, because I see a lot of people putting some not so great information out there in the world. And I kind of hold my breath and I'm like, there's a lot of noise out there. You just to make sure you find someone you like, know, and trust. We were just talking about that, making sure we're putting out good content so people, practice intermittent fasting, in a safe manner. So
yes, for sure. And then talk to us about intermittent fasting and exercise, because I know it's a big thing because we have to refuel and for muscle growth, whatever goals people have when they're in the gym or they're exercising.
Yep. So this is always a little controversial because I know there's definitely differing schools of thought. There are thoughts that I have to eat pre and post exercise. I have to eat so much protein. I have to take a workout stimulant before I start exercising. And I understand intellectually, I understand that. But I would also say that your body has plenty of fuel to exercise with. You have fuel in the form of glycogen in your skeletal muscles and your liver. Your body will tap into that. It will maintain your blood sugar exercising. So I get up early. I'm up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I just with water, I go to the gym. I lift heavy, I do HIIT, I do Tabata, whatever it is. I come home, and then I continue to fast until 10 o'clock in the morning, and I feel fine. Now, I would say to you that every person's an individual. I know if I'm going to do a really tough leg workout the following day, I'll make sure maybe I'll have a snack before I go to bed. So maybe I didn't cut off my fasting window at 6 o'clock. Maybe I ate something at 8. Maybe I ate something, I call it a monkey food. Maybe I had, a banana, some cashew, some unsweetened coconut, just to give my body a little bit of a bump if I'm really concerned. Some days I quite honestly don't eat enough calories, not because I choose not to. It's just my lifestyle. I'm on the go all the time. And I just I don't want to eat protein bars if I can avoid it. I'm usually that person sitting with a Pyrex container eating food in the car while I'm waiting at some type of a sports event. So to answer your question, I think that it really depends on how is your energy during your workout? Do you feel like you're running out of gas? Reengineer, what did you eat the day before? I get up in the morning and exercise. I know some people do it at the end of the day. Obviously, you wouldn't be fasting all day long and then exercising. So it's really just thinking about what do your macros need to be so that you can get through a workout. Obviously, before exercise, it should be all about protein and carbs. If you do need to eat, and less about fat, because fats, takes so much longer, so much harder for your body to break it down. It just isn't as bioavailable as the other macros would be. So really, it's all bio-individual. If you were to say to me, I'm going to try this for a week and see how I feel. And if you have energy, great. But if you don't have energy and you feel like crap, okay, well then I would re-engineer. What did you last eat? Did you drink enough water? I mean, all the things that could be contributing. Where are you in your cycle? Because we know that for women, depending on where we are in our cycle, sometimes we can run out of gas just because of what our hormones are doing. So super important to kind of think about where you are and what works best for you.
Yeah, I think it also shows how much more in depth this is than just like,
Mhm.
okay, let's just fast and just,
Right.
I mean, obviously listen to your body and you know your body best and how you feel, but it's definitely a topic that working with someone more professional and they know what they're doing helps kind
Exactly.
of just make it a little bit easier for you. And I think too, with intermittent fasting, like you having 2 meals a day, I
Mhm.
think it also makes you think, okay, is this food nourishing?
Right.
You really don't want to waste what you eat on something that has empty calories and it's not
Right.
as nutrient dense. So I think that also has a benefit as well.
Absolutely. And I think
Um,
that it's super, super important for people to think about. I know it's not like sexy. It's not like, I mean, I was loving your topic. I think you had a bag and you were showing what you had bought in the store, but like healthy things that you can have on the go that won't spoil in in your purse or your bag.
yeah.
You have to think like, I know if I'm working out in the afternoon, which I don't prefer doing, I'm actually going to get off here. I know I'm going to get off this podcast. I'm going to get on the treadmill because it started to rain. I was going to run outside and that didn't happen. And I don't normally work out this late, but just thinking about like, how can you best support your body? It's so important. I know when I was in my 20s and I was an ER nurse, I wasn't as good about it. I mean, I think back to drinking like Coke Zero and all sorts of garbage because ugh, I mean, I'm like,
Yes.
no wonder why I didn't feel good. I wasn't giving my body anything it could actually use. It was just chemicals. So just making sure that you're honoring your body is so, so important.
Is there a certain amount of time that you should see results if you choose to intermittent fast, or is it just kind of like try it for a week and
Oh, I'm a fan of giving it a few months.
okay.
So I think it depends on where you are in your life. Like I know when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was very easy or much easier for me than it is in my 40s to like lean out. So anything I do now, I'm like, I know I have to commit to doing it for a couple months. Whereas when I remember after I had kids, it was like super easy for me to lose baby fat and body weight and all those things. And gosh, it's a whole lot harder at this stage. So I would say commit to doing it for 4 to 6 weeks. Take pictures. If you're looking for fat loss, take pictures, take measurements, just so you know, something objectively to look at. I don't weigh myself. I just go by how my clothes fit. And so that for me is a better calculation. I just don't like people to get hung up on numbers because I have some clients who are very numbers fixated. And I'm like, put your scale away for the love of God. Just put it away because I think it can be it's like pardon me, it's a mind fuck. None of us want it just can be so detrimental. So to answer your question, I would say 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum, preferably a little longer, provided that you're feeling good. It may take a couple months if you're a little bit older. But yeah, definitely it's can be, and I hate to keep harping on that, but I feel like one thing that I've tried to be very honest about is that how much more challenging it is depending on where you are, what stage of life. I'm sharing my own experiences. It was easier for me when I was younger. Now I have to be a little tighter about everything if
Yeah.
I want to get results. So
Yeah. As I've heard once you hit 30, you kind of start going downhill. And I'm like, I don't accept that
no,
in my life.
no. I think I was probably 42. That's when for me personally, that's when I started to notice. So,
Things
up
are a
until
little
that
different.
point, yeah, no, it's just a little harder. Like I was telling someone the other day, I was like, there are these limiting beliefs. So we were just talking about the limiting beliefs. And I was like, I think you can be in your 40s and still be lean and still look great. But
Mhm.
it also means like you can't go bananas on the weekends. You have to be really like, I know if I'm going to go out to dinner, I'm very disciplined about how I eat the rest of the week so that I can eat what I want. But yeah, it's all those fun things, but you can still have a great, as we age, we can still age gracefully. You just a
Yeah.
little bit more tweaking than I thought I would be doing. So
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on
you're
and bringing
welcome.
fasting. Where can we find you?
I am all over social media, but I would say first place is my website, www.chtwellness.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. That's where all of my peeps live. So I'm kind of all over the place. It's always interesting. You get like differing communities on each platform for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.